On season 2, episode 6 of the Highlights Only podcast, I had an opportunity to sit down with Mag Rodriguez. He's the program director for Backline Milwaukee, which is a program that provides $20,000 grants to 4 artists each year while they're in a 12-week music accelerator program. He's also the program director for Generator, which was listed as the 9th most innovative music company of 2020 by Fast Company magazine. On top of all of that, he also has his hand in artist management. If you're interested in his story, the episode starts now. Being able to share information, I feel like, is key now. And if we process information so much differently than what we did 5 years ago, realistically. And I think it's only gonna get worse. Realistically get worse. It's like the way we consume music. An album comes out, all the albums came out yesterday. You listen to that one album maybe like 3 or 4 times, and then it's just like, all right, I'm ready for next Friday for some new music to come out.
Yeah, I mean, I faced with that. Like, I talked to so many artists about that piece of, like, there's this artist in particular that I'm working with right now who is working on this album, right? Has been working on this album for almost 3 years now, right? Hasn't released anything, released a couple singles in between. And I remember having this conversation, and I was like, dude, there's 30,000 songs being released every day, right? And you're working towards these 12 songs, you know? And then you're gonna release these 12 songs, and you might be able to stretch it out with singles and like some content for like 3 to 4 months max. But then it's out, and then you have to do it all over again quicker than you had to when you last released your album. But yeah, I mean, consumption is interesting, and I wonder how it transforms though, because I think like vinyl coming back has been interesting. There's more vinyl being sold than CDs. Like the vinyl consumption is as high as the early 2000s all of a sudden. And I think it's going to continue to go up and up. I think will quality start to, be more important than quantity, but I don't know.
I feel like it comes to a point. It'll converge at some point, I feel like, because we want things fast. We consume information so much faster than what we did in the past. But like what I just said to you, it's about being able to create like quality content on scale. No, I don't feel like artists are at that point where they're able to do that just yet. They were at a point, maybe 2000s, I feel like they were. Because Lil Wayne, for example, mixtape after mixtape after mixtape after mixtape, just giving us something to listen to. But when you look back on it, like if you look back at the suffix, the prefix, the drop 1, drop 2, drop 3, all of that is quality content that has survived all the way to this time. But it's like, is the quality of the music going to change to the point where we want to listen to it longer? And when is that going to happen? And it's funny you said something about vinyls. Me and my manager yesterday were actually looking up like vinyls, like just like old like Frank Ocean albums, like the vinyls for that, like Nostalgia Ultra, and seeing like how much they were like on eBay. Because he wants to create like this weird vinyl wall, which is actually, it looks pretty dope. You can buy like the vinyl cases on Amazon and just like stick the vinyl in it. And I'm like, damn, that's actually like pretty dope. I would want like a wall of just like straight vinyls, like Jay-Z, Nas albums. That'd be pretty fire, man.
And I'm sure those prices are going up too, especially vinyl collections were like a thing in the 80s, 90s. And I think it's a thing now too, man. We're like getting the first edition, and like you're seeing a lot of those stuff even like sell out before they come out. And people don't even use them. Most people don't even have vinyl players. Like they just collect these vinyls. And I think, yeah, man, like there's this show that just came out, High Fidelity. I don't know if you've seen it, with Zoe Kravitz on Hulu. It's great. Like I remember I watched the whole series. It's like 10 episodes, and it's great just because I love Zoe Kravitz. But I remember at the end of the season, I was like, I'm going to go buy some vinyl. Yeah. I started going online and buying some vinyl. And I think there is, for me to work in music, you get so distracted by like the amount of music that just comes out. And then like, I'm also an audio engineer. I'm a mixing engineer as well. So like you would think I would appreciate quality more than I do. And I feel like I've just got lost in this world where like I listen to Spotify or Apple Music, and like that's only 10% of the full quality of the music that's supposed to be listened to. While compared to a vinyl, you get like the full blown quality, right? So I think I would hope quality comes back though. But quantity is just, we're overrun by it. It's so much.
I mean, I think it starts when artists, really sit down and get their music mastered and not just like put it out to just put it out. I feel like I feel like that ruins the experience half of the time.
Yeah,
Personally.
but it's like history repeats itself. Like you think about, the punk era, right? Like punk rock, right? That was horribly mixed music, but it was like, but kids loved it, right? Like the youth at the time were like, they wanted to be rebellious, so they said we're gonna put out this cheap quality music, and people are gonna love it. And bands blew up from like cheap recordings, and then you get like the XXX Tentaciones, right? Who puts out this record that's like peaking. It's like the mixing is awful, and it goes viral, and it's huge. So I think there's this other side too, where like the youth are so focused, like they hate structure, right? And with structure comes quality. So sometimes like there's this big like spectrum of like the music lovers who want the mixed, mastered, perfect quality, the ones that pay that are on Tidal because you get the higher quality streaming. And then you have the consumption era, which is a bigger crowd of like kids who like SoundCloud, where someone just makes a song today and then they upload it the same night and it's not mixed or mastered. Like what's right or wrong, there isn't really a way to justify it. It's all subjective.
Do you feel like it's an age gap? Because I feel like I'm 28, and I feel like a lot of my friends are on that side where it's just like I want my music to sound really, really good compared to just like people just like throwing it out. Because I feel like the whole SoundCloud era, all of that music translates so well to like the younger generations just because whatever it is, like it's popping. They can make a TikTok video for it. They can put it on Instagram like really, really quickly. And no one's going to truly consume it because they just know that 15 or 30 seconds of the song. And that's what makes the song popular.
I don't know I think everything's an age gap depending on where you are in life, right? I think when, people like me and you at like 25, 26, 27, 28, even 30 plus, for the most part, we have our life somewhat figured out to the point where like we have a job, we're making money, we can afford quality, right? Like we start making like, I just recently started making quality decisions in my life because I'm in a position where like this is super random, right? But I finally bought a bed frame for the first time in my life, right? I used to just have my bed, like my whole life was just like the mattress and the spring and just on the corner of the room. And like I've been pretty financially straight for like the last like 5-6 years of my life, right? And for some reason, that's just something that I didn't think about. And I remember I was walking through IKEA and I was looking at all the little sample rooms and I'm like, yo, this shit looks tight. Like, why don't I have a bed frame? And I went and I bought a bed frame. I bought like a huge mirror. Like before, my room was literally just a mattress with the spring. It was like a cheap bed. Like my room was so cheap because that's all I knew growing up. So then I bought like a super expensive bed, a bed frame, a mirror. I got like the two things side to the bed. Yeah. I got some plants in there. My room finally looks like a room. So like at 25, I finally can afford to make buy quality stuff. And I think about that's the way I want to consume my music now, right? Now at 25, I'm like, I should value quality music more. So let me buy vinyl and let me buy a vinyl player. While a 16, 15-year-old kid don't have a job, they're going through puberty, so they have all these emotions where they can relate more to something that sounds shitty, that less quality, but it's filled with emotion compared to something that's so polished and so clean because it doesn't feel like it's in their world, right? So at least that's the way I try to switch my mind as a consumer, even when I'm working with artists, is like I try to identify who's your audience, right? And usually their audience are people that are like them, right? So there's this kid that I'm working with right now that we haven't announced. We don't announce the Backline artists until some time, but one of the artists in our program was a D1 soccer player on a full ride, right? His freshman year, like nationally ranked, and he decided to drop out to pursue his musical career, right? Was on a full ride. He had like prospect agents looking at him for professional, like to go pro, and he decided, you know what, I don't want to do none of that. I want to make music, right? That to me lets me know who his audience is. His audience is going to be 19, 20-year-old kids who decided that college isn't for them and they'd rather pursue their art. And I want to find out where those kids live, right? And those kids live on Tumblr and Twitter, right? So how do we create this audience for you in this realm, right? So I feel like I'm going to a whole nother conversation, but I think to answer your question, I do think there is an age gap it just depends on what people are going through and how they want to consume music.
I agree. I feel like when I was like 15, 16 years old, I was listening to whatever the hell it was anyway, just riding around in my mom's car, like, and it's just like that experience. Like, even when I was maybe 20 years old, Rolling Papers came out. And my friend who, like, we had like a track house on the east side, he had like a drop top Audi. And the song, I just want to ride with the top down. That song. So we would just literally ride around the east side with just like that song blasting with the top down. Because it's all about the experience and the way that music connects with you at that specific point in your life.
Yeah. No, man, it's real. I think, there's that whole idea of like what music you want to listen, like growing up, like the music that makes the biggest impact, I think, and this is just like scientifically speaking, is from the ages 12 to 22. That 10-year gap is the most impact. Like, that's when they do the reunion tours when we're in our 30s and 40s. We're going to go see those acts. And like, you see it now, like the Millennial Tour with like, Bow Wow and Ja Rule and all these. Like, that music impacted us when we were young, because we were either listening to music we could relate to or music we wanted to relate to, right? So driving around with the drop down or whatever. I mean, for me, it was just like, I was huge on Soulja Boy for whatever reason, because I had just discovered the internet, right, around this time, and then he was putting music up on the internet, and it was just like, what is this, right? But yeah, I think it's very interesting, like how influential music is, I think, to our development. I could name a song for every year of my life.
I could too, realistically.
Yeah,
I can name a song for some reason I've always felt like this sounds super corny, and I feel like everyone feels this way about like their favorite artists, that I was like somewhat connected with like Kanye West whenever he would put out like an album or something. And just was like, okay, College Dropout. That dropped. I was like super young. I think I was like going into high school or something like that. And then like 808s and Heartbreaks came out, and that was the time like me and my girlfriend broke up from like 8th grade to like sophomore year of high school. And just like always like the different like transitions in my life, like a Kanye West album came out, and I would always try to relate that album to like what was going on with me.
Yeah. So what was in control? Was your life in control, or the music too, right? Because like I'm the exact same way with Drake, right? So I think there was like So Far Gone, right? And I remember listening to So Far Gone. I was like, that was my 8th grade year of high school, right? 2008. And then after that was Take Care. Or no, Thank Me Later. And then Thank Me Later came out. And that was when I was like I think it was like my freshman year of high school. And I was just like, it felt so real. It was like the records and the albums was like, it gave me a confidence. I remember listening to this album like every morning going to school on the school bus. And I was just like, it gave me this confidence. And then, then it was like, Take Care. And then that's when I had like a little girlfriend. And then all of a sudden I was an emo kid listening to this music. I was heartbroken without even like actually being heartbroken, just because of the music. It was so impactful. But I think music like that, it impacts a generation, man. I think what Kanye did, I think that's why their fan bases are so big, because so many 13, 14, 15, 16-year-olds are now in their mid-20s and can afford to buy anything that they put out, or that's why their tours sell out. But
it's just weird. It's like Drake was probably 26, 27 years old when he put out those albums, and he's relating to like an 8th grader or a freshman, a freshman in high school. It's crazy how that music translate. Like there's an age barrier within music, but it's just like it kind of shows that we're all going through the same shit every single day.
Yep.
No matter like if you're rich, poor, like middle class, like everyone has like the same trials and tribulations.
Yep.
It's insane.
I mean, I used to measure my success by Drake songs in a weird way. Like I remember when there was a song that said like 25 cent on 25 mil, right? I can't remember the song. It was with Wayne, I think Tyga. But I remember telling myself when I was like 17, I'm like, at 25, I gotta be a millionaire. Because of that song, like it was that loop in my head, and over time I think, and then like in the last year I'm like, why did I want this? And then I realized it was because of the music I was listening to that was creating me, and a lot of it was like it was creating ambition too. Like that music is the soundtrack of my life, which is weird. Like music in a weird way becomes the things we go to. Like I mean, you said you did like track, right? And it's like, how impactful is music when it comes to track, right? Or how impactful is music at a for basketball players, soccer players, like music can influence your emotions right before a big moment, right? So I think for me, it influenced like everything I wanted to do was very related to the music I was listening to.
I never thought of it that way. You just said like music impacts your life in such big moments. And like it does. Like you listen to music, you consume music, you relate yourself to music. I never thought of it that way. It's like the big moments in my life I can like go back and be like, damn, like I was listening to this and then this happened. Like I got fired up off of this. So like this happened. Like I won this race or I won this race. And it's just like in your head, you go back and it's just like, damn, that playlist was fucking fire.
Yeah.
And it was like forever changing too, depending on like your mood or how you felt. Like for me, like it was forever changing. Like we would leave on like a Wednesday or a Thursday to run like Friday, Saturday, to whatever. Or like I would, create a playlist on the bus with like new music, old music, whatever that I know can like stimulate me just like a tad bit and give me that little boost. Like when I won conference, like I won conference in like the 100, 200, 4x1, just like amazing fucking meet, best meet of my entire life. And it was, gosh, I think it had to be, it was Drake. It was Drake. It was just like straight up like a Drake playlist for like a super long time. And even the year after, I kind of like traveled a bit with track. And it was like, if you're reading this, if you're reading this, it's too late, right? Yeah, it was like that album, like that entire fucking album was my playlist. Maybe some Big Sean sprinkled in there, but it was just like all Drake.
Oh, yeah, like 10 bands, like records like that, just like
energy, bro. Like
yeah, energy. Yep. No, man, that's real, man. Like I think about 2015, I went through like this horrible breakup, right? Dated this girl for like 3 years, and Trap Soul had just came out by Bryson Tiller. Yeah. I cannot listen to that album anymore. Like if I listen to, even though like I'm over that breakup, I was like mad young, it wasn't even that deep, but I cannot listen to that album anymore because there's almost like, we also attach trauma to music too, right? Like we also attach success to it, where like maybe 10 years down the line, you'll be at a bar somewhere and I don't know, Energy comes on by Drake. You'll immediately remember that, damn, I won that conference because of this. But like, if Don't comes on by Bryson Tiller when I'm out, I'm like, yo, turn this shit off. Like, I can't listen to this right now. Because I remember, like, I threw all my emotion towards this album. I was listening to it over and over and over again, where it's like, in a way, it was therapy, right? It helped me cope through it, like, through the music. But then I was like, man, I don't want to listen to this ever again. But
it's the truth, man. Music is cheaper than a therapist. Yeah. That's what it is. And I look at it like, dude, shoes are cheaper than a therapist. That's how I look at it. Back then it was music, now it's shoes, but it's the truth, man. Like therapy. I mean,
but therapy is more.
Yeah, you need it at some point
than the music, man.
You just sitting there sulking for like 10 days, haven't showered in the corner, your room's all dark.
Yeah, I think it helps. It helps with the to get you through the process. But you still need therapy, man. I love therapy. Therapy's great.
Speaking of therapy, I had Corey Fells on here last week, I think it was last week or 2 weeks ago. He came on the podcast and he was talking. That's how I kind of got introduced to you. I've been following you for like quite some time, just for like some other things or whatnot, just because like Ishtar and stuff like that. But he kind of like introduced me to you, talking about you were part of the documentary for Black Men with Mental Health. So I kind of want to ask you this question: how was it for you growing up in Milwaukee?
It was interesting. I mean, I think I was raised in Mexico, so I was born here, and immediately after I was born, my parents decided to move back to Mexico, and I grew up in a tiny village of like less than 100 people. It was very like farmland, but there was like a strong sense of community. Like that was like everything was community, right? Like you needed something, like my mom would trust me to go into like the main village, like at 4 years old to go grab something, right? Like I could roam freely. It was like there was no sense of like worry. And then when I was 5, 6 years old, we ended up moving to Milwaukee. I knew no English, no nothing. And I remember it was like I got here and like 2 weeks later I had to start, I think it was like first grade. And I went to Pierce, which is in the north side. It was the only school that would like let us enroll that last minute. So both me and my sister, who was a year older, I was in first grade, she was in second grade, and like we got through it. Like I think it was the biggest culture clash immediately moving here was there was less freedom, right? You know, like we my parents would walk us to the bus, and then they would pick us up from the bus. But then that was it. Then we had to just sit in the house because we lived in the hood. We lived like on 12th and Arthur, which at the time was like pretty bad. And that was it, right? We all slept in one room. It was a 2-bedroom apartment. I mean, 2-bedroom like upper unit in the south side. And like we all slept in the same room because it was like you hear gunshots and everything. So we would like we were in the smallest room in the back of the house just to like prevent anything from happening. And I think that was like so much of like my childhood like trauma was like trying to like transition into this new world. And all I was focused on growing up from then was like creating a sense of community that felt like the community that I had in Mexico. Like at least what I as a child would remember what community was. And a lot of it was just like I challenged a lot of the status quo since a young age, right? It was just kind of like, I played soccer growing up, so it was like, why are we playing in these shitty fields? But then there's like really nice fields, you know, out in the suburbs. So one of my first challenges was like, I want to go play club soccer, right? I don't want to play in the hood. Like these fields suck. So I ended up, you know, getting me and my friends, like my mom would drive us out to the suburbs and we would play club soccer and just like things like that. And yeah, I mean, I think just growing up in Milwaukee was very interesting. I think I spent like the first 10 years here up until like I was like close to going into high school, just trying to figure out like what is happening, right? What is and I turned to the internet. My parents bought us a computer when I was like 11 years old, and that's when I kind of like started roaming and like trying to figure out like, man, what is Europe? Oh shit, there's a whole nother world out here. And, you know, what are all these states? What's New York? What's LA? What's Chicago? I would have my parents drive us down to Chicago on the weekends and just go hang out. So like I was very curious on like the south side of Milwaukee and the north side of Milwaukee isn't all there is to the world. So hopefully that answers that.
Yeah, that definitely answers the question. It's super interesting. My fiance has like the same story. She grew up in India, and she came here when she was around 4 or 5 as well. So I think first was it first grade? So first grade for her, and it was kind of like the same thing. Like over there, you're kind of taught English, but she moved from India to California, and it was that same thing. It was just like complete culture shock for her, especially as like a young child coming from over there to here, not really having much. She was saying like her dad would walk like 3 miles every day to just like catch a bus to walk another mile just to get to work. And it's just like living in California, you know, that's already just like crazy expensive. And like everyone kind of like sleeping in one room, like it kind of like builds character, man. Like it really does. Just like listening to like her stories. And it's like she wouldn't be nowhere near the person she was today if she didn't have that transition from India to California and then from California to Wisconsin.
Yep. I mean, I think we just underestimate sometimes like how much we can endure, because I think it's messed up as it sounds, right? Like, you know, we are very comfortable now as humans, right, than what we have ever been. But I think through that, we've also lost a big portion of like, you know, what creates that fire inside of us, right? If I wouldn't have gone through everything that I went through, I wouldn't have the fire that I have, you know, and the sense of urgency to like want to get things done. You know, I mean, it's messed up that there's like some trials and tribulations you have to go through. But I see it in my little sister who, you know, she's lived here her whole life. She didn't, you know, she was born in 2000 where like my parents were already good, financially. And I see her, she's 19 now, and I don't like, and I think she's doing great. Like she's doing cool stuff. She's a photographer, but I don't see the sense of urgency with that me and my older sister had, right? Like my older sister's urgency was like, she needed perfect grades, right? She's the oldest. My mom could have been a doctor if she wanted to. She just didn't have the resources. My mom was brilliant, super smart. And she encoded that onto my older sister, which was like, you're going to be the education one. And then my dad was an entrepreneur. So my dad encoded in me as a very like young age was like, you're going to be a business person. or a businessman. And that's kind of the routes that we went growing up. So like my sister, she has had perfect grades from elementary school through med school, and I was a doctor. And
dope.
she just finished med school, and she's doing her residency now at Harvard, right? So she went from literally nothing to now Harvard, basically on a full ride all the way through. So, and then me, on the other hand, I took the entrepreneur route, and, from high school, I started my career as a manager, and then now I'm at the position that I am in now. I didn't go to college, but I mean, like, I have a position that, I'm the only person in my organization that doesn't have a bachelor's or a master's degree. So like, but that's because that fire from within us was like, you guys need to do this because of everything we have done. And then I see it in my younger sister, who, she doesn't have that fire. She's just kind of like, oh, you guys are straight. They're straight. I could take my time and figure it out.
I'll be all right.
Yeah,
No worries.
and it's like, I challenge, I have like a lot of problems with that, because on the inside, it's like, I want to be supportive, right? Like, you didn't have to go through the shit we had to go through. But at the same time, it's like, when is that fire ever going to turn on? Are you just going to coast through life? And I see that a lot, like growing up in the States, like as I entered middle school and high school, I saw a lot of like my, classmates just kind of coast, right? And even some of my friendships, like, they don't have that fire within them that is like, I want to be great, right? Like with me, it's like, I want to be great at everything that I do to bring it home. Like I'm always working towards a bigger mission. And most people don't have that. They're just kind of like, I pay my bills, go out on the weekend, and go on vacation once a year.
Yeah, that's interesting you say that. See, for me, I grew up on the north side, and not like the best part of the north side. But my mom worked for MPS. So she was like, there's no way in hell you guys are going to MPS whatsoever. So she shipped us all the way out to Menominee Falls. And it's interesting that you said you don't see that sense of urgency in like some people around you. I feel like throughout high school, that is like what I did not see, that sense of urgency from anyone. It was like, for me, like I knew track was going to be my way out. Track was going to be my way of like not being a financial burden on my mother after I graduate high school. It's like, I'm going to get that scholarship and you're not going to have to pay for anything. Like that was like my main goal. So it's like, when I got on the track, it was like, the only way you're going to get me off of here is if you kill me or if I die. Like, that's it.
Yeah.
And, like, everyone else was just kind of, I'm just going to get through practice, coast through. If I get a scholarship, cool. If I run in college, cool. And it's just like, not running in college was not an option. Like, I had to.
Yeah.
It's wild. And my fiance has, like, a little sister, and it's just like that same thing where it's just kind of like, she's 15, too. You know what I'm saying? Like, that sense of urgency to kind of, like, pull your bootstraps together and like really like run through the fucking wall. Mm-hmm. It's not there. I feel like it's not there with a lot of people in that younger generation though.
Yeah. I mean, and I tell my sister sometimes, and like we sometimes get into arguments about it. I'm like, when I was 19, I had just booked a European tour and a US tour for someone I was managing, right? At your age, right? So like the idea of like, so she ended up deciding to like leave school. So she had gone to UW Milwaukee, and she decided to leave school. She didn't drop out. I don't call it a dropout, because she finished the semester, and she was just like, and she said that she didn't feel like she was mature enough to finish school.
Fair.
And I was like, that's fair. I respected it. I'm like, 100%. The fact that you can acknowledge that, I think that's great. But then I told her, I'm like, you're never gonna feel like you're ready to do anything. You just have to do it, right? Like, I used myself as an example. I was like, when I was 19 years old, I knew nothing about going to Europe and managing an artist or doing a U.S. tour at 19. I didn't have no money because we come from the same parents, and I hustled my way, and we did it, and we rode through it, and we made it happen. And then after that experience, I'm like, oh, that wasn't too bad. Let's do it again, right? And I told her, I was like, look, I'm okay with you saying you don't want to go to college, because I didn't go to college and I figured it out. But what I'm not okay with is you deciding that you just want to get a regular 9-to-5 job because your only goal is, I want to move out of my parents' house, right? If your goal was, I want to get a job so I can pursue my photography career, or I can learn or find a mentor and something, like, I'm like, cool, go do that. But I think settling, I have such a hard time with when people settle. Like, I've stopped being friends with certain people when I start seeing them settle, because like I I think we do have a privilege in this country where we can pick and choose who we want to hang out with and who we want to be around and who do we decide to keep around. And I think it's only up to us to decide, you know what, this is what I want for me and the people around me. And I don't think people take advantage of that here, man.
No.
Like you can't, there's certain countries you can't do that, right? Like, I mean, places like India, even though it's illegal, like they still have their, caste system where like, if you're darker in skin, you can't hang out with someone who's lighter of skin, right? Your opportunities are so limited, right? Places like Mexico, like if you live in a village and you try to move into a big city, people will not treat you the same because you're from a village. So it's just like, where is the urgency? Like, and that's all I try to preach, man. Anytime I talk to like anyone who wants opportunity, it's just like, find that one thing that creates fire within you. But
Just can't be complacent. That's just what it comes down to. You can't be complacent. Like you said, we're given the opportunity to kind of like pick and choose what we want to do with our lives, pick and choose who we want to be friends with, pick and choose who we marry. Take advantage of it. Don't just sit it on the back burner and it's just like, well, my only goal is to do this. It's like, think about all the other things you can accomplish while doing this one thing as well. Or what are you most passionate about? And figure out a way to connect it. And if you got to hustle and do like a bunch of different side jobs, do it. Like, man, when I was coaching at Marquette, my first year there, I coached full time. I had 3 different jobs and just figuring out a way to like keep the bills paid, figuring out a way to, make it.
Yep.
Because that's what my passion was. I loved it and I still love it, but that was just kind of like, that was a fire for me. So it was like, I was going to do whatever it takes for me to be able to get up and do that, even if it was for like 3 hours out of the day.
Yep. But I've used to spend more time thinking about that piece, right? But I think now it's like, with the amount of people, I think for every 10 people I meet, there's like one that's like has that fire, right? Like just yesterday, even though it was like a weird day with like the whole family stuff going on, but I got a call from a buddy of mine. His name's Ant Morales. I met him almost 2.5 years ago. And he reached out to me about this artist that I had discovered this artist at the time from Milwaukee through my friend Weston, who's a photographer. And I reached out to this artist, like, yo, I want to work with you. When I reached out to this artist, he's like, well, I have 2 managers. And one of the managers was this guy, Ant. And the first day I met with him, I was like, do you know what you're doing? He was like, nope, don't know anything I'm doing. I was like, cool, like, I want to help you, right? I want to help you guys at the time. And he was like full ears, right? It was 2 managers at the time. One of them ended up like being weird about the whole situation, and he kind of like faded out. But then Ant was like so like in it. He was like, yo, I'm down to do anything I need to do. He was a manager at Macy's at the time. And he was like, dude, I'm down. I want to be in the music industry. He was 28 at the time. And, I was 23 at the time. And he was like, dude, I want you to mentor me. First time someone tells me to mentor them, and I mean, this guy's like 5 years older than me. I was like, man, whatever, like, cool. I'm like, don't call me a mentor, but I'm down to help you. And I like 3 months later, we keep working with this artist, and I take him out to LA with me. I had a meeting with Apple Music at the time. They invited me to do they were gonna roll out this program, and they wanted me to test it. So I ended up going out there. The guy had a broken leg. He had just broken his leg. And he was like, whatever, man, I'm coming. So in crutches, went out to LA with us. And we did a bunch of meetings, and then we came back, kept working with this artist. That whole thing with that artist didn't even work out. Like, that artist just kind of like fizzled out, I guess. But he's like, man, what's the next move? Like, I want to work in the music industry more than anything. And I was like, cool. I was like, move to LA. Save as much money as you can and move to LA. And once you're ready to move to LA, I'll help you find a job. So he pulled out his 401k, and he like hit me up like, I think it was like September of 2018, and said, hey man, I'm moving to LA January 1st. I was like, bet. I connected with my guy, got him a job. So he had a job as soon as he went out there. I got him an apartment with my guy who had an apartment out there, set him up. Within 3 months, he was killing it, right? Then 2019, spring of 2019, he was program events manager for a bunch of Coachella parties, right? And then fall of last year for Camp Flognaw, he was Drake's tour manager, right? So he works for Drake's tour management company now through some of my friends. And he ended up being the tour manager for Drake at the Camp Flogna, which wasn't the greatest one because he got booed off stage. But for him to go from a manager at Macy's to now that, and then yesterday he gives me a call, and he's like, dude, I just got an A&R job working for APG, which is Warner's publishing company. So in a year and a half, he was able to now go from literally being a manager at Macy's in Milwaukee to like now having the pulse and working with some of the biggest artists in the industry, only because he bet on himself, right? Like, he was like, man, thank you. I was like, bro, don't thank me. Like, have you looked in the mirror and thanked yourself? Because you believed in yourself and you found that fire within yourself and you made it fucking happen, right? Like, I only introduced you to people, right? I can introduce people all day. Like, I've had 10 artists that go through the Backline program, and I've introduced them to some of the biggest people in the industry. And there's only been 2 out of those 10 that take on those relationships and take them all the way through. So I think that's super important, man. I think, you know, that's that 1 in 10 are people that I find that end up saying, like, I want it. And then that to me makes it worth it, everything that I do, right? It's just like, you know, because I was at 1 in 10 for people, right? So,
like you said, you gotta bet on yourself at the end of the day. You can only put people in position, and then after that point, it's all on them. How long have you been into music and been in the music industry?
I started when I was 18. I mean, 17 technically, but 18 really. So it's been, what is that? I'm trying to think, what year was this? 2013. So 7 years.
Okay.
Yeah. So started working like I would say professionally, started working with Ishtar when I was 18 at the time. He was 16. We made an EP, and then ironically, after we released that EP, APG, who my friend now works for, flew us out to LA. That's under Atlantic Records. And that's kind of where it just like took off. And then from there, we released a mixtape, toured the mixtape in Europe and in the US, went on tour with Absol and Schoolboy Q, and then did South by, and then we released an album, and the album blew up. Had a ton of support from like Spotify, Apple Music, charted on Billboard. And then he transitioned into movies, got him a movie with Matthew McConaughey. We're working towards a new album, but around that time, relationship just got rocky between the both of us. After we were working together for so long, it just turned into a situation where like he didn't know what direction he wanted to go in the industry, and I was getting to that age where I was like 22 at the time, and I was like, I need to know what my next move is. Yep. And we just like on good terms decided, let's just put a pause on this. Through that, I got a couple job offers out of some labels, but then some family stuff kind of came up, which made me stay in Milwaukee. And through that process, I got contacted by Generator and 88.9 Radio Milwaukee to create this program that I've been running now for almost 2 years. So yeah, it's been a lot of weird turns, but this has been probably the most exciting work that I've done so far.
Did you kind of envision this for yourself back in the days when you were listening to Soulja Boy?
No, man. I think I knew I was going to work in the music industry since I was 13. So I knew for a fact. When I was 13, I was like, this is what I'm going to do. But I thought I was going to be a producer engineer, which I still am a producer engineer, but I thought that was going to be my full-time thing. I did not envision that I'll be doing what I'm doing now, which is like, it's weird because I'm the only person in the music industry that has this role, right? Because we created something that's completely new and it's growing so quickly. And essentially what I'm doing is I'm doing economic development through music by developing artists and communities. So working right now, I'm in Milwaukee, Detroit, and Cleveland. And then we have a ton of conversations all over the country to take the program everywhere else.
So the project that you're kind of working on, that's a Backline thing, right? Can you tell us a tad bit about that, man?
Yeah, so Backline is a musician accelerator program. What's a musician grant accelerator program? So in Milwaukee, we select 6 artists every year, and we award them a $20,000 grant. And then we put them through a 12-week program where we help develop them as creatives, connect them to the music industry and build a network for them, and then also plan out the next 6 to 12 months of their career. On top of that, we do mental health. So we spend during the 12-week program, there's a 12-week mental health component where they meet with a therapist and a life coach every week. And then there's also financial literacy as well through a Northwestern Mutual, who's one of our sponsors. They connect with a financial advisor that helps them just get their financials in order. So that's essentially the program. We don't take any equity or percentages in any of the artists. They each get 20 grand. And we do it twice a year in Milwaukee. So one spring, one fall. We have the same program through a partnership with Capitol Records and Motown in Detroit, where we only work with 4 artists a year. So it's one program a year with 4 artists. And then recently we just did a contract with the city of Cleveland to do the same program, one program with 4 artists a year in Cleveland. And then we have a ton of conversations all over the country, like Durham, North Carolina, to Puerto Rico, to Austin, Houston, Texas, Nashville, Memphis. So we expect the program to continue to grow. I got hired in May of 2018 to create the program and kind of just run it.
Nice. Where did that idea come from? I know you said Generator, right?
Yep.
And then 88.9 kind of had like their hands in it.
Yeah, so the idea originally was from 88.9. They wanted to figure out a way to make a bigger impact in the music scene. So the first idea was, let's just award a grant to artists, right? So they were just going to pick certain artists and give them money. Generator has been doing, we've been working in this like startup side for a little bit over 8 years now. And they're based in Milwaukee and in Madison. They're in various cities all over the country and in Canada. And they already had a model that works with startups. They had a free model that was for startups with no equity, and then they had a equity model that also included money. So then 88.9 reached out to Generator. They said, let's do this together. But they didn't really have a model of like, none of them had experience working with artists. So they just kind of put out a bid, like looking for someone to do it. And it was funny because when they announced the program, I thought it was bullshit. Like I literally reached out to the guy at 88.9. I was like, yo, what the fuck is this? Like, what are you guys trying to do? I just thought it was irresponsible at first to just give someone 20 grand without any resources. Because I know artists and like money doesn't.
Club on Saturday.
It's not even that. I do think there's responsible artists that would have definitely like did a good job with it, but artists don't just need money, right? Yeah. Like if they just wanted money, they could figure out ways to get money. They need support and like actual foundation. And that's kind of what I pitched to them, and they said, cool, like you don't like the way we're going to do this, how about you run it? And then it went into, the rest is kind of history.
That's nice. I wish when I came up to someone like this bullshit, they were like, you want to do it? Hell yeah, let's do it. So it's all about teaching the artists a little bit more about the music industry, giving them guidance. How did you go about picking those topics, and why is it so important for them to know those specific things?
Yeah, I mean, I think I based the model around the way that my mentors and myself work with artists, right? So I designed the program how I've worked with artists in the past, right? Was like, let me figure out your creative process, right? Which is the first month of the program, is really just trying to identify how do you do what you do and how can I enhance it? Because most of the time, if it's not broken, don't fix it, right? Let's just accelerate what you're already doing, right? Most artists already have a process. They just don't have the means to be in the studio 4 or 5 times a week. They can only be in the studio once every 2 weeks. So we just accelerate that process during the first month. And then I also educate them in the back end, right? Where it's like, do you have a W-9, like LLC? Do you have a W-9? Do you have agreements for your shows, right? Do you know how to manage your social medias? Do you have your Spotify, Apple Music in order? Like, do you have your bio? So, like, I go during that first month, I also then help them. I educate them on how to just manage their business side a little bit better without focusing too much on their musical side, because I already assume they know how to do it. I just provide resources if they want it. And the second month of the program is very much so how I was able to build my career with Ishtar while both of us still living in Milwaukee, which is you have to travel, right? You don't have to leave Milwaukee. You just need people in LA and New York to champion you, right? Where the big markets are. So We do a week in LA and a week in New York, and we introduce them to like Apple Music, all the major booking agents, other DSPs like AudioMax, Spotify, and managers, and they get to meet all the full spectrum from attorneys to distribution, and that's basically just building out like, you know, what I always tell the artists is after this program, you can't use the excuse, I don't have money and I don't know I don't have any connections, because we literally provide that for you. And then the last month of the program is essentially how I would work with artists, which would be, cool, we have resources now, we have music now. Now, how do we roll this out? How do we take everything we've learned and say, cool, let's push this out? Because the industry changes every 6 months, right? So I'm learning something new every 6 months through these meetings that we do too. And we just map out how we're going to roll out their music. So that's kind of how I designed the program, just how I was already doing the work in the past.
Yeah, I can see why this is so important for artists in Milwaukee, just because it's such a small market. Why do you feel like artists don't stay in Milwaukee and kind of like leverage those connections in California, you know, well, LA, Atlanta, you know, places like that?
I mean, I think there's different answers to it. I think people don't stay because it's an excuse, right? I think people don't stay for the same reason some people do stay, right? I think, you know, there's this, like, I was just using this analogy with one of my barber, right? So my guy who cuts my hair only cuts hairs on Fridays, right? Probably one of the best barbers in the city if he wanted to. But he decided to not be a barber anymore and just cuts hairs for 6 hours on Fridays for like his friends. And it's that idea of like that NBA, that player, that guy that we all know that is an amazing basketball player, but decided to not go to college and decided not to go to the league. But then the rest of his life he spends telling everyone, man, I could have been in the league, right? But they didn't want to put the work in, right? I think we have so many artists in that same realm who decide, if I stay in Milwaukee, I can use the excuse, man, if I just would have went to LA, went to New York and could have did this and that. And then we have those artists that do leave to LA and New York. And then they go to LA and New York just so they can say, I at least tried, right? But then they go to LA and New York and nothing happens. But they at least say, I tried and you didn't try. And they can look back at those people back home and say, look, I went to LA and New York, and they take that picture with that one artist and they could post once a month, like working, plotting, blah, blah, with the homie, you know.
Yeah.
But then nothing happens. It's very, very rare, because making it in the industry is really based around luck, right? There's so many different things that have to connect beyond just talent that has to connect, that I think people think that moving gets them closer to luck, but it really just gets you closer to the people, but it doesn't really make a big impact because there's hundreds and thousands of artists. What works right now is community is so important worldwide, right? Like if an artist is blowing up and someone will know someone in that city and they'll call in and check in and say, hey, who is this artist, right? Are they buzzing in the city? If they're not buzzing in the city, then narrative is everything, right? If the label can't attach the narrative, like a good example is K-Camp, right? K-Camp's from Milwaukee, moved to Atlanta because he thought Milwaukee wasn't the wave, and he has a hit single that pops up every year, but he never, like no one considers him a superstar, even though he's had massive hits before, because he has no narrative, right? Like he has big songs, but no, Atlanta won't rep him because they know he's not from Atlanta, and Milwaukee won't rep him because he never really knows nobody in Milwaukee. He's not here. He's not spending time in the community. So like the difference between a K-Camp and like a Wiz Khalifa, it's like we know where Wiz Khalifa's from, right? We know where Chance the Rapper's from. We know where Drake is from, right? Even Party Next Door. Like I would argue Party Next Door and K-Camp have had the same amount of hit singles, but Party Next Door has a bigger narrative and a bigger fan base because we at least know where Party Next Door's from, so hopefully that answers that.
Yeah, that does. Do you think that has helped you long term, just like actually staying in the city?
Oh, 100%. I'm that Milwaukee guy, right? I think within the industry, people respect the fact that I move with integrity. Like I just had this Paris Hines, who is Ari Lennox and Lucky Day's manager, Eli Velez, who works for Rock Nation, and then Business Boy, who's a producer originally from Milwaukee, now lives in LA. I had them in town for the final judging for Backline, and they looked at me and they said, "Yo, this shit is dope. Like we respect you so much because you're moving with integrity, right? Like you are making an impact that affects more than 5 people. The impact that you're creating is going to impact a full community. And long term, that means more than me going to a label in LA and New York and, signing a couple artists and making a little bit of money. And then I have 10,000 followers on Instagram or 20. Like that doesn't mean anything. I think I'm more focused on legacy than I am on clout. Granted, these people have more clout than me, but they're not. You can't trace their legacy, right? Like it's like you can trace what artists they've worked with, but if you hand me 10 superstars, right? If I worked for a label, you're just going to be handed the superstars. You're not making that impact. I get to build superstars from the ground up. And I think that's helped me a ton, right? Like people pick up the phone when I call because they know there isn't a hidden agenda, right? Like I can get a meeting at Apple and I could get a meeting at every major booking agency because they know I'm not, if I was calling from a label, they know I'm taking 50 to 80% of their money. But through Backline, I'm taking no money. I'm just helping. So I think it just builds different types of relationships.
That makes sense. So you like the groundwork, man. Just like building them up, just kind of getting them in position to kind of just take over. It is about legacy. It is. Like realistically, like you said, anybody can have a bunch of clout, but at the end of the day, that doesn't really mean anything. What are people going to remember you by? They're going to look back and be like, oh, this person managed this person from like this for this span of time after they already blew up. But then it's like, well, shit, this person was with this person from the beginning, worked him to get to this level, got him meetings with Apple, Spotify, like all these major DSPs. And it's just kind of like, damn, like that's the guy I want to work with instead of someone that's just like, oh, I'm just going to manage you from behind the scenes. Hit me if you need something.
Yeah. It's the long game too, man. I think I'm not saying that like those big things won't happen in time. It's just like when I think about careers that like the people I look up to, I think about like the Quincy Jones, right? Like Quincy Jones, the Jimmy Iovine's, right? Like Jimmy Iovine, for example, he started off as a engineer, right? He was a studio assistant who was just around, he was not the best engineer. He just made the relationships, was genuine with the people that he met. And then people started calling him in for stuff. Because like, we like that guy. He's not the best, but we like him, right? And then he just kept surrounding himself and showing his true character to everyone. And then in time, like now he went on to build some of the biggest companies in music just by staying true to himself, right? His clout didn't come until his late 30s, right? I think about Rick Rubin, right? His clout didn't come till his late 30s, right? Where it's like, I'd rather build a career that like, I reap the rewards when I have more wisdom, so I don't make dumb decisions. I think we live in a fast world where like everyone wants to be 25, 26 with millions of dollars in a yacht popping bottles, right? Yep. Like just to flex on Instagram. But like, I won't lie, I wanted that at one point. But then I realized that like that would have only set me up for a different type of, a different life that might have just not been that enjoyable long term, right? I get to stay true to myself and, move with myself. And I've had those clout moments and like the whole, go to the club and pop bottles every weekend. Like I did that whole thing, right? We're like, spending money on clothes and jewelry. And then I look back at it and I'm like, man, that meant nothing, right? Yeah. Like the things that excite me now are like having a good credit score, right? Buying property, spending time with my family. Like those things to me mean so much more now and I think those things are going to prepare me for a longer, more fruitful life with peace. I think that's the core thing. I want peace. But yeah,
that's fair enough, man. I just got two more questions for you. What advice do you have for some upcoming artists trying to get whether that's finding a manager like you or just trying to get into the industry?
I think back to like that AMP stuff. Just bet on yourself. I think finding a mentor. I think that's so important. I feel like people talk about that so much, about like finding mentors. There's so many, like, I don't think there's a right or wrong when it comes to finding a mentor, but my advice when it comes to like finding a mentor is create value, right? I think that's the most important piece. I was having this conversation at the barbershop yesterday. There's this guy who's talking about how he just got his real estate license, right? And he's super excited about it. He's like, I'm reaching out to all my friends who, you know, have bought property so they can give me a chance. And I'm like, man, look, I think that's great. I think you should do that. You should go round up as many people who are buying or are interested in buying property, have bought property, and then go to the person doing the best sales and the best work in your company and tell them, hey, look, I'm new here. I have 10, 20 people that are all interested in buying property. This is my first year doing it. Can you do this with me? And we can split the commission 50-50, right? Because at that point, you're not going to this person for like, hey, can you teach me everything you know, right? It's, hey, I'm coming with 10, 20 clients. I don't know how to do this. And you're bringing value to the table, where then at that point, it's like, that person can say no, or they can say, cool, let me make this quick money and show him how it's done. And at that point, he can build a long-term relationship. Like, you don't know if someone's really good at what they do, they're probably not going to stay in that position forever. They're probably going to either be the boss or they're going to start their own agency. And I think that's the same thing with management. Like, what I was doing when I was 16, 17, 18, I was preparing myself. I was like, you know, there was this saying that someone, I can't remember who told me this. I wish I would remember because I say it all the time, but it's like, the people you see going up are the same people you're going to see coming down. So it's like, that's the way I like to treat people. And I started finding the interns, right, at the time. So when I was like 16, 17, I would find the interns at all the labels, right, or the entry-level A&Rs, right? I found them on Twitter, on the forums, on Instagram, and I made a list and I started reaching out to them. At the time, like, these guys would put their email address, or like, they were very accessible.
Booking information below.
Yeah, and I mean, these were just A&R, so these were just the scouts, and a lot of them had like 1,000 followers, maybe 500 followers, and I started reaching out to all of them and sending them music, right? Or like on the forums, like, hey, have you checked this out? Hey, like, I found you on Twitter, and like, have you heard of this before? And they would be like, oh, this is cool, thanks, man. And you know, that would help them do their job, because then they'll just take that song and send it to like their A&R board. And then if something got signed, cool. If it didn't, I don't know. Like, I feel like I was responsible for a couple signings by me sending music out. Like, one example is Smino, right? I gave Smino his first show in Milwaukee, and we gave him his first show in Chicago, right? And that's somebody we were sending music out, like, yo, check this out, check this out. And then, you know, Smino's a superstar now, right? So that's just one example. But what I was doing at the time was, like, I was building my network. And when I started, and this, I was already working with Ish at the time, but he wasn't ready. So when we finally finished that project, like 2 years later from me connecting with all these people were now like official A&Rs. Like, they had moved up a little bit, and I started sending the music out again, like, to these same people. And they had already trusted me, because it was like, you brought me quality music before. And sure enough, like, when we released this EP, all these people reached back to me like, yo, who is this? And I'll be like, oh, it's actually an artist that I'm managing. And then I'll be like, you know, they would be interested in signing him. So I would ask questions like, man, like, can you give me some advice? Like, what should I do? And then they would give me advice and connect me with lawyers. That's how we got his first booking agent. That's how we got his first attorney, was just through me asking, like, hey, man. But what was in it for them was, if they helped me out, Ish might sign with them, right? Like, Ish's biggest record, which was Too Bad, was given to me by an A&R that wanted to sign Ish, which was produced by Jay Graham, who was Travis Scott's main producer, right? So, like, relationships like that were just coming through that. So just to circle it back, like, the best advice when it comes to, like, being a manager is find people in the industry that you want to be associated with and reach out, but reach out with value, right? I think an easy way to do it is reach out to A&Rs or managers and say, hey, man, like, I'm a big fan of what you do. Can I send you some music just for you to, like, check out? Like, I want to be an A&R, or I want to be a manager. Can you check this out and, like, tell me your feedback on it? And just start sending him music. Or ask them a general question like, hey, man, like, I want this, and that. Or hit up a manager in the industry and just be like, look, man, I'm down to work for free remotely. Like, if you need me to send out emails, you need me to do artwork, find ways to create value for somebody. And then, you know, to this day, just yesterday, I sent one of my mentors some music of this artist, and she's a A&R at a label, and she was like, yo, this is really, really dope. I was like, yep. I'm like, I know him if you want me to connect you with him. And she was like, yeah, please do. And, you know, she might do like a distribution deal with this guy. Yeah. So I still do that to this day. Where like, I no longer need to do that, but I still like to find ways to give value to people.
Yeah. I think it comes down to this, man. And this is something that this generation, the younger generation, I don't think understand, just because, like you said, like you went through that time where like you were in the club, you were popping bottles, you were doing X, Y, and Z, and that's all, you know, the younger generation sees. But sometimes you have to, I always say this, you have to eat shit, plain and simple. You got to work for free. You got to do whatever you can to kind of just like get your foot in the door. And then at that point, then it just becomes so much easier because you've made those connections. Now you have stuff to put on your resume that you actually did. You know what I mean? It's like no one's going to hire you off rip. It's just like people graduate from college and they expect to make, you know, 6 figures right away. Like, nah, man, you starting at 30. Yeah. You have no experience. I can't do anything with you.
Yep.
Plain and simple. Last thing I got for you, man. What's next on the docket for you?
I think right now my main priority is this program. Yeah. I can't say there's something. There's going to be a big like press run on Backline next month. We got picked up by like a huge like international publication for the work that we're doing.
Just add that to my SEO for this podcast episode.
Yeah, I mean, when are you releasing this?
I think I got like 2 more, and then this one.
Okay, well, if this releases after...
I can release it whenever, though.
If you release this after March 10th, I could tell you what it is.
All right, cool.
Cool. So, I don't know if you're familiar with Fast Company.
Fast Company.
It
sounds super familiar.
Yeah, so they're like the major magazine in innovation. So there's like they're the Forbes of innovation. So yeah, so we just got named number 9, the number 9 company in innovation for music.
Okay, that's
so for 2020. So like previous companies have been like Spotify, and last year was like Live Nation. So it's just like all the major companies in the space. So we got named number 9, which is out of 10. So it's going to be, especially for us to only be around for a year and a half, it's going to be like a huge press run. We're doing a bunch of like interviews, and usually how it works, it goes Fast Company, then Forbes, and then it's like this big chain of like articles that come after. So I think right now for me, priorities, like I'm prepping for that because we have so many prospect cities that are interested. But we haven't quite figured out the expansion and how we scale this program. We've scaled our previous companies our previous product lines at Generator in the past, and they've done an amazing job at that. But now try to replicate the system. Yeah. So a lot of my work right now and focus is how do I create a sustainable expansion, and then I'm also going to be transitioning out of running the program in Milwaukee day to day to overseeing the other programs. So I'm kind of doing both roles right now. So overseeing Milwaukee, Detroit, and Cleveland. But we have a director in Detroit, and then we're hiring a director in Cleveland. So a lot of my work is just like, how do I prepare myself to lead a team now that's beyond just me and my program manager? It's going to be now me, 2 directors, and 3 program managers as we continue to expand. But we're probably going to have another 2 programs by the end of the year, and probably 10 programs by the end of next year. So just trying to like prepare to oversee a full staff by the end of next year. So, you know, and I'm only 25 now, so it's like it's also weird being the youngest person at my company and also having to like work right under the CEOs. So it's an interesting dynamic, and yeah, so I think I'm just preparing myself. Like I've been taking leadership courses online, and like I've built the different type of, I have different mentors now. Like I started reaching out to like mentors in different spaces, in particular in like leadership outside of the music industry, just because I want to make sure that like I'm being efficient and I could take it on when it's time to take it on.
That's a good call, man. Honestly, I think when you talk about leadership, you kind of look within like the specific field that you're working in, but like everyone has different leadership like skills, and it takes different leadership skills depending on what industry that you're depending on the industry that you're working in. So that's super smart. I'll say this, this is something that I've done at my last few jobs. It's like the Clifton Strengths Finders.
Yep.
You've done that.
Oh, yep.
So I was gonna say, like, whatever like team you're like managing, it's always good to just be like, it's a little extra money.
Yeah.
But it's always good to just have the team just like do that.
Yep.
And then sit there, debrief with everyone about those things. And then you get to connect with that person on a deeper level because you're learning about them like face to face, but you also have like results on them. And you know if they're like a creator, an initiator, like a bunch of different things along those lines.
Yeah, one of my mentors that I've reached out to in that space is this woman by the name of Kelly Fitzsimmons, and she's like serial entrepreneur, has been super successful, and that was I met with her the first time, and the first time we met, she was like very interested about what I was doing with Backline, and then she was like, I want to meet with you again, but before we meet again, I want you to do this Strengths Finder she's like, because depending on what you get, I'll let me know if I want to help you or not. And I was like, oh shit, okay, this is deep. So I did it, and she loved it. Like my top 5 are command, what is it? Strategic, man, look, I actually have this. I'm gonna pull these up because I'm curious to know yours too, man. Let me pull these up. Yeah, so mine's are actually analytical, strategic, deliberative, activator, and command.
Mine are strategic, futuristic, adaptability, deliberative, command.
Fire.
Those are mine.
Word, so we shared 2 of them.
Yeah.
That's dope, man. Yeah. We have CEO, what is it called? CEO top 5s, according to Kelly. Shout out Kelly.
Yeah, dude, those things are important. It's weird how like that little like intrinsic stuff is like super important to like your personality and like your leadership style and the way that you can get led. It's super interesting.
And I make all the artists that go through the program do it.
Oh, that's dope. That's really smart.
Yeah, so it's a good way for me to like figure out, like a lot of conflict happens because like, for example, you're futuristic, right? And mine is like activator, right? So we can clash because you're so focused on like the pieces that's coming next, and I'm so focused on activating something right now. And the resources, I don't have enough resources to create the future that you're thinking about. So like knowing that as we like communicate will let us know, oh, okay, cool. Or like strategic. For me, like sometimes I work with an artist and they'll be like, dang, man, like, you're doing too much. And I'm just like, well, no, I'm being strategic. I want to make sure that if we do this, and that, this will happen. But yeah, I have troubles with some of them. Like after they're in the program, I look at their top 5 and I'm like, oh, this is going to be a mission, I think there's one there's idealistic or something.
Yeah, it's idealistic. One of those.
Yeah. So like if there was like an idealistic futurist and Woo, which is like the
when you over.
Yeah. Like if that was a top 5, I'd be so concerned. I'm like, oh, this is going to be, how are we going to create some activation here?
Yeah.
How are we going to get something done? But it's really good. I think I'm glad that you've done that. I think I made all my friends do it. I made my girlfriend do it. I made some of my siblings do it. I'm like, this is a good way to identify what your strengths are. And it helps me understand people a little bit better too.
Yeah, it's worth the $20.
Oh, of course. Yeah.
Cool, man. I always end like this. Is there anything that we didn't get to cover that you want to speak on a little bit, or any questions you have for me?
No, man. I think go vote.